just me.
It's such a good debate.
I'm just going to talk with you about climate change.
Good. Good to see you.
Thank you, Andy. And welcome, everyone. It's nice to be back again this year. And we're going to go from talking about Levi's to talking about climate change. Because I have with us two serious advocates for doing something about that. Michael Brune is Executive Director of the Sierra Club, and Michael Shellenberger is the founder and president of the Breakthrough Institute. So we have two Michaels on the stage. They have that in common. They also have in common that you should take action on climate change. We need to get off dirty fuel, and then they separate with how exactly we get there. Michael Brune does not believe nuclear power should be in the mix. Michael Shellenberger does. And if you haven't heard these two before, you probably have, but they were just debating behind the black curtain before in the 1 minute we had before we came out here. So we're going to get this debate off to a kickstart with both of the gentlemen taking 5 minutes at the lectern, and we are going to start with Michael Brune. Have at it, Michael.
Thank you, Natalie. Hi, everybody. Good to be here. So the topic of the debate today is accelerating climate progress. And as Natalie said, really the focus is on what's the best way for us to do that. And the way that we like to think of the question at the Sierra Club is to ask another question, which is, do we see fighting climate change to be an obligation? Do we see fighting climate change to be an opportunity? Or is there a chance for it to be both? So we're just on the first day of the conference, and I think hopefully some of you were at the earlier sessions where we had Heather Zeichel and then Lisa Jackson and Mark Gunther and Brian Demain talking about the threat of climate change. And I think we've all seen the reports, or at least read the executive summaries. We've seen the impacts already of wildfires, droughts, superstorms. The house that I grew up in was flooded by Superstorm Sandy. And the reality of the times right now is that if you don't have a personal relationship with extreme weather, you probably soon will. So I thought what would be useful to start the conversation today is to talk a little bit about where we have come in the environmental movement with the Sierra Club over the last 10 to 15 years and where we're going. And really, I could tell this story through the 3 times that I've been at Fortune. First time I was here, I was on a panel with David Crane, who I think is here today, who we were debating whether clean coal was an oxymoron. And this was in the context of a coal rush that was being proposed all across the country. This is in the first couple years after the turn of the century. There were 200 coal-fired power plants being proposed from coast to coast. And we, in the environmental community, but particularly the Sierra Club, vowed to fight every one. And to date, 180 plus of those proposed coal plants were either defeated or withdrawn, based on a lot of different factors. Broad economic factors, the price of competing fuels, a lot of organizing, and a lot of litigation. And the second time I came to Fortune, we talked about coal and gas and nuclear power. And this was soon after I joined the Sierra Club. And our pledge then was that we were going to work to secure the retirement of 1/3 of the coal-fired fleet, currently operating coal-fired power plants. We wanted to shut down 1/3 of those coal plants and have them locked in to a retirement schedule by the end of 2015. And I'm very happy to say that we are more than 2/3 of the way there. 67 gigawatts of coal has either been shut down or will soon be shut down. This is part of the largest environmental campaign in the history of 122 years of environmental activism. And so where we are now is in thinking through whether or not we can realize the promise that's been made by environmentalists for the past couple decades, which was that if we install enough wind, if we install enough solar, if we begin to take out some of the fossil fuel incumbents, 2 things will happen. Solar and wind deployment will increase, and the cost will drop dramatically. And that's exactly what we've seen. 60% drop in solar panels in the last 4 years, 40% drop in the price of wind in the last 4 years. In Minnesota, a judge ruled that solar should be installed more than the mandate because it was cheaper than gas and cheaper than coal. In Colorado, Xcel Energy, which supplies power to 2/3 of state residents, asked for more solar to be installed beyond their mandate because it's cheaper than gas, cheaper than coal. There are now 11 states that get at least 7%, some of them as much as 27% of their electricity coming from wind. All 11 of those states, the prices that they're paying for electricity have dropped. Some of them are dropped by a total of 0.3%. Every other state, the cumulative average is that their prices have gone up by 7% across the country. So the Sierra Club's goal over the next couple decades is to retire the entire fleet of coal-fired power plants and to move beyond gas at the same time. Our aim in the electric sector is to get completely fossil fuel free by 2030. So with 36 seconds left, let me say two things. First, is this hard? Absolutely. Is it unreasonable? Yeah, it is. It's exceedingly difficult. And it is unreasonable to suggest that. But it's the best solution that we have because it'll put more people to work, it'll cut costs for millions of Americans, it'll improve the quality of our lives, cut pollution costs, and it'll put us finally where the trends are shifting across the country. Price of coal is going up, price of gas is going up, the price of new nuclear plants is going up, the price of solar and wind are going down, and efficiency can add economic gains on top of that. So thanks again for inviting me here today, and I look forward to talking with you.
All right, thank you. Michael Shellenberger. Thanks, Michael.
Well, I want to start, I think most of you may have seen last fall that 4 of the world's top climate scientists, including James Hansen from NASA, now retired from NASA, sent Mike and other environmental leaders an open letter. They wanted to send it openly, including to Fred Krupp, who's been here, and EDF and NRDC, asking them to take a second look at nuclear. Well, it didn't take very long for Mike to send out his answer. It was no, we're not going to rethink nuclear. And he was really clear about that in his communication. Fred, to his credit, has begun a process to kind of reconsider it internally, but no real change from the other big the other big environmental organizations. Just as some background, about 12 years ago, Ted Nordhaus, my best friend and colleague at Breakthrough Institute, and I lobbied for a big push into clean tech. We pushed for $300 billion over 10 years. Between 2002 and 2008, we saw some movement, $50 billion for renewables out of the federal government. It really took Obama with a big vision on clean energy to come in. Between 2009 and 2014, we did $150 billion. It was almost about half of what we asked for as this new Apollo project. And during that time, we watched how the stimulus worked, we watched how these clean energy investments worked, and a number of our friends said, you guys need to take a second look at nuclear. Renewables alone is not going to solve the climate challenge. In 2012, solar was 0.11% of our electricity in the United States. Wind did better at 3.5%. But the big change, of course, was from cheap natural gas. Coal went from 50 to 38% of our electricity mix. About half to 75% of that, depending on whose estimates you use, was from natural gas. Mike and the Sierra Club are against natural gas. They're against the coal to gas switch. They say that we don't need natural gas, we can go right to solar and wind. There's basically very few credible energy analysts who agree with that position. EDF, and to Fred Krupp's credit, doesn't agree, and they support reasonable expansion of natural gas with strong regulations, as do we. Mike says we can do 100% renewables by 2030. We said, where's your plan? There is no plan on the Sierra Club website. There's no plan anywhere. I mean, it's a $70 million, $100 million organization a year. They don't have a plan. We looked at the National Renewable Energy Lab's plan. They have a plan for 100% renewable by 2050, 20 years later. And here's what it requires. It requires baseload renewable power, that's hydroelectric dams, 50 hydroelectric dams the size of the Hoover Dam by 2050. The Sierra Club has opposed all new dams since 1968 with good reason, because dams are so environmentally destructive. They say it would require more biofuels and bioenergy from a size of the land the size of Pennsylvania, which would be an ecological disaster in the same way that corn ethanol has been an ecological disaster. And NREL says it would require 100 to 150 gigawatts of utility scale storage, which basically only exists as pumped storage, which is basically dams. And on top of that, it would require a doubling of the US electric grid. Huge right-of-way challenges and a huge footprint. So if we go from where wind and solar did between 2010 and 2013, and you look at what would be required to achieve what Mike is talking about, you're talking about a 7 to 10 times increase, mostly using hydroelectric and biofuels. Wind and solar would be a minority of that renewables. Now contrast it to what does actual decarbonization look like to deal with climate change? It looks like what France did in the 70s and 80s. They went from 0 nuclear to 75% nuclear in 20 years. We went from 0 to 20% nuclear in 20 years. Again, solar in 2012 was 0.1%. Wind was 3.5%. If you care about climate, those numbers have to matter to you. To today, natural gas and nuclear have obviated 38 times more carbon emissions than wind and solar combined. And in an analysis done of what's faster to scale, nuclear is 5 to 7 times faster to scale than wind and solar. The good comparisons done online, all of this at thebreakthrough.org. If you wanted to do 100% renewable energy by 2050 using German energy levels, the human footprint on the Earth for energy is the same size as agriculture. That's a massive human footprint. So if you care about the environment, if you care about the climate, you got to rethink your position on nat gas and nuclear. I'll end with a quote from NASA scientist James Hansen, who said, "If you think we can solve the climate crisis on renewables alone, then you should also believe in the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny." Thank you very much.
All right, Michael, thank you. Thank you both. So 2 different opinions. You said that your goal to get off fossil fuels in 2030 is unreasonable, but you're willing to take it on. Michael says you don't have a plan. So how are you feeling about getting there in 2030?
Well, we do have a plan. We operate differently from your Breakthrough Institute. You know, we're not a think tank. We're a group that gets results on the ground. And so we
had pretty good results with the stimulus, actually. But
okay, so our plan has several stages to it, which I outlined before. So the first stage is to prevent new coal from being built. 200 plants were proposed, all of them were opposed, and almost all of them were defeated. So that prevented the lock-in of 50 years or more of coal-fired power plants well into this century. Second stage of the plan is to knock out 1/3 of the fleet and scale up clean energy. That's well underway, as I talked about before. The third part of that plan is what we're in now, which is to get the remaining 2/3 of the coal fleet. So one of the things that you said that was incorrect was we don't expect that we can go straight from coal to clean energy. We're now targeting 400 individual boilers across the country. We're in negotiations with dozens of utilities. We're intervening in hundreds of ratepayer cases across the country. So we know quite well what it takes to keep the lights on and to get off coal. And what we're doing is unit by unit, plant by plant, utility by utility, state by state, we're phasing out of coal. We're beginning to prevent a build out of new gas, and we're scaling up clean energy at the same time. The fourth stage of that is as clean energy gets cheaper and as more and more comes online, we have an opportunity to go after gas at the same time. This is where we're going to be over the next decade, and then we can complete the work and get off gas. Again, I want to stress that this is hard to do. It is unreasonable to suggest that it can be done, but it's also what climate scientists demand. We have to have a 50% cut in carbon emissions by 2030 to have a shot at keeping runaway climate change from actually happening. So our plan is on the ground, place by place, boiler by boiler, and it's working.
Michael?
Well, it's a little disingenuous for you to talk about climate change when the world's most famous climate scientists have written you a letter, and you dismissed it after a couple of days. Not even willing to reconsider the club's position on nuclear. San Onofre, which was one of the 2 remaining nuclear power plants in California, shut down thanks to the advocacy of the environmental community. And California power plant emissions, power sector emissions, went up by 1/3. Well, why was that? Well, a large part of it was moving from nuclear to natural gas. Our view is that there's an energy hierarchy. If you are on natural gas or coal, go to nuclear. It's zero carbon energy, or close to zero carbon energy. If you're burning nuclear, don't go back to gas. Go to nuclear. Sierra Club says it's against natural gas. They're lobbying the California legislature right now against gas, lobbying around the country for gas. But they know that the only way that you can reasonably shut down coal plants is with huge quantities of abundant and inexpensive natural gas. Now look at what's happened in Germany and Japan. Germany is held up by Mike on his Twitter feed regularly as sort of the exemplar of how to move to clean energy. Well, Germany's been moving back to coal, Mike. I mean, they've been burning more coal over the last few years. They're also burning more biomass. And you never talk about the land footprint. This is one of the most deceptive parts of when people talk about renewables. In people's minds, they think wind and solar when you talk about renewables. But when Germany's moving to renewables, it's more hydroelectric dams. It's more biofuels, which are ecologically devastating. Japan started paring back its nuclear after Fukushima. Where did they go? Coal, natural gas, and even burning oil. And their emissions have skyrocketed. So in the real world, utilities need baseload power. And if they're not going to get it from natural gas or nuclear, they're going to get it from dams, which are just absolutely devastating. I'm with David Brower from the Sierra Club, who oppose dams because their impact on the landscape is devastating, except for the poorest countries in the world, like Ethiopia, which should be able to build dams. And I'm against bioenergy. Bioenergy, increasingly, the science shows, it wreaks absolute havoc on landscapes,
you're also,
biomass and biofuels.
And you're for nuclear power, and I'm going to let you respond to that, and you are not. Is there anything that, in his argument, that if nuclear power were to become leaner, safer, and smaller, that Sierra Club would come around to supporting it?
Well, yeah, but now we're talking about the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy again, right? So like nuclear power is not, it's not a debate except among the talking pundits. There are 3 plants that are under construction in the US. There are 5 that are coming down, probably another dozen that will come down. There is no proposal to build a single nuclear power plant in any free market unless there are massive subsidies. There are no proposals to build them. So let's look at the ones that are being built. The Vogtle power plant in Georgia, 12.5 cents per kilowatt hour. The 2 power plants that are being built in South Carolina, 12.5 cents per kilowatt hour. The one in Georgia, the Vogtle power plant, $1 billion over budget already. The one in South Carolina is only $500 million over budget, but it's just getting started. So remember that, 12.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Guess what the latest contract for wind came in New Mexico? 1.9. Latest contract for solar in Austin, Texas by Recurrent Energy, 5 cents per kilowatt hour. So what do you want to do? Do you want to align yourself with an industry that is growing dramatically? Do you want to align yourself with an industry that has fuel that is free, delivered? If the sun doesn't shine anymore, we've got much larger problems. Or do you want to align yourself with an industry that at best is stagnating, is the most expensive form of energy, and has a whole set of other environmental and proliferation risks?
I mean, look, you can't say climate change is a planetary emergency and then be against natural gas and nuclear energy, which have displaced 38 times more emissions than wind and solar. You're citing numbers so mischievously, I have to say, Mike.
Which one?
You're citing subsidy. You're not including the subsidies in it.
Give me one.
Please go to my Twitter feed. It's on the Breakthrough. We cite the Energy Information Administration's numbers, which actually contradict yours, which they include the subsidy cost. Nuclear is base load power, and it scales 5 to 7 times faster than wind and solar. Just go look for yourself. I would encourage the audience to go look for yourselves at this. So on this cost issue, I just don't believe it. I know you. I know you love nature like I love nature, and for you to be like, we're going to put all our eggs in the solar and wind basket, when there's only a couple of examples in the world where any zero carbon technology has scaled in the time that we need to scale it to be serious on climate, 20-year period. It's France and Sweden. Germany produces 1/7 the power that Sweden got, 1/5 the power that France got in the exact same time period. And not only that, but all of your renewables are coming down in prices. In fact, as you integrate renewables to the grid, and this is very wonky, but it's very expensive to integrate intermittent renewables to the grid because of the energy penalty of the integration and the backup power. So just again, don't take my word for it. We put all this online. All the data is there. all the serious energy analysts just kind of look at this and go, this is an obsession that the club has had with small is beautiful, you know, against the man. It's a new world, Mike. We got to deal with climate change, and we got to be serious. The climate scientists are asking you, our grandchildren, our unborn grandchildren, are asking us. And this prejudice against nuclear and gas, it's just irrational. It doesn't have anything to do with anything. It has to do with a kind of fantasy of harmonizing human civilization with nature. It just has really, it's not adequate for the situation.
Well, let's talk about that because, Michael Shellenberger, you do come down on traditional environmental groups that Michael represents. And is that a concern, as complex as this is and as unreasonable as anyone's goals are, that there is this much friction in how we get there?
No, look, you know, when Michael wrote his Death of Environmentalism piece, I remember distinctly when you called me about it. It was right after my daughter had been born. I was working at Rainforest Action Network. I'd already been to Fortune maybe once or twice. And I thought it was awesome. I thought it was great. And in particular, it challenged the Sierra Club in a way that I thought was refreshing and healthy. It is okay for us to disagree. It's okay for us to, you know, I spent time in jail with James Hansen, so I have a deep relationship with him. It's all right for us to have a difference of opinion. And
Absolutely.
I think it's healthy for the Sierra Club to say, here are the principles on which we think development should occur. I have to say, you know, you cite the Energy Information Administration, the EIA, as being a bedrock for environmental energy forecasts. The information that underlies your assumptions, so the EIA has assumed that they are notoriously bad at forecasting, notoriously bad. For example,
Everybody is, actually, but.
Well, let me give an example. So the EIA is saying that there will be zero PV built from 2015 to 2027. And there will be zero wind that will be installed from 2015 to 2027. Their rationale is that subsidies will drop off and there will be zero installations. Is there anybody here that thinks there will be no solar and no wind installed for 12 years? How can you base a plan on that?
Oh, it's not. I mean, our plan, we have a plan.
It's cited in 14 of your slides.
Yeah.
It's a basic bedrock of what you're suggesting.
Mike, again, like, if you want to be credible on climate change, you guys just got to rethink your anti-natural gas and your anti-nuclear position. I really hope you do, because otherwise, I would love to have the Sierra Club as an ally in dealing with climate, but right now, you guys are marginalizing yourselves. And it just, please call Dr. Hansen and ask for his feedback on the nuclear issue. I think he'll give you a lot of his thoughts.
We'll have to invite Dr. Hansen. Maybe we can do this again. Gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there because we're over. How about these two? Okay, going after it? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.